Hey everybody. So just gotta get myself set up a little bit here. So I'm not going to be playing today. I'm going to try to start adjusting a list to get to 80 cards. I started messing around with it yesterday a little bit, but I don't think I was taking the best approach. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what the best approach might be. So again, I guess I can pull up the spoiler real quick. Orion Sky Nomad. It's a legendary creature, bird serpent, costs 3, and then hybrid white-blue, companion. Your starting deck contains at least 20 cards more than the minimum deck size. So in Modern, we're working with 60 usually. If you use this guy as a companion, it's going to go up to 80. If it's your chosen companion, you may cast it once from outside the game. So this guy lives in your sideboard. If you want to use it as a companion, at the beginning of the game, you show your opponent that you do in fact have this guy in your sideboard and you're using it as a companion. Hey, come back to Earth. So I'm just going to talk a bit today about how we should go about building from 60 to 80. I started messing around with it yesterday. Swizzy in the chat, he uses Dow Swiss as his name, started taking a stab at it, but I feel like there's a sort of a more methodical approach that we can take before getting into starting to jam in a lot of random flex cards that we've been dreaming of over the past months, but haven't had space in our 60. I don't think we just have sudden, like carte blanche to just start jamming in all sorts of cards. I think we have to be a little bit careful about how we do it. So anyhow, I was just going over Yorion. I did watch the sort of tutorial video that Wizards puts out for all the new keywords, the new mechanics. And one thing that stood out to me that nobody really had talked much about in the Discord is the fact that when you're playing with a companion, you show it to your opponent at the beginning of the game, but then it kind of just has to sit revealed like off to the side for the whole game, like in a separate zone on top of your sideboard, I guess. So it's kind of always sitting there, sort of like your commander when you play EDH. Like both players are fully aware that card can be cast on any given main phase. So it's definitely something to be aware of. You're not going to trick anybody with Yorion. In fact, if anything, you have to be careful not to forget that you can do it. Alicia in the Discord told us that she was playing, she was up to like turn 10, not a lot going on, and she totally just forgot that she could have cast this crazy bomb at any point. So you do have to play with it revealed all the time. You guys know what it does at this point. Just you can blink any number of stuff, and you can target astrolabes, creatures, whatever. So we're gonna be playing with this. That's the point of this short little stream here. Is how do we effectively take a 60 card deck up to an 80 card deck? Mathematically, in theory, it shouldn't affect us that much, right? We're changing the size of the deck, but if you could maintain your proportions perfectly, math says that the deck should draw pretty similarly. Of course, you hit a ceiling at 4 cards. Like we can't run more than 4 ephemerates. Past that, if we want to keep the proportion the same, we do have to start adding other blink effects because we can only run 4 of any given card. With creatures, that's a little different since we can run Eladamri's Call or potentially other tutors, things like Neoform, Eldritch Evolution, or what is that green one? Something like Devastation, Finale of something. The one that Druid combo plays. We have access to creatures that we can max out at 4, but we can potentially run virtual 5, 6, 7, 8th copies of creatures. So with that in mind, I want to adjust the deck this afternoon. I am going to want to try to fit in one of these new triomes, if not 2. I've played tons and tons of matches with Bant and with 4-color Soulherder, and I guess 4-color is more relevant for these lands because we're worrying about adding in black. Like both of these triomes have black, but the question, I guess, is do we want, like, if we're cracking a fetch turn 1, do we want to have one land with green, blue, black, or do we want to have one land with green, black, white? And obviously, depending on what your second land drop is, you can cast certain spells and not others. Both of them have green and both of them have black. The difference, I guess, here is blue versus white. So it's pretty close. It's pretty close, but I'm leaning towards Zagoth. If we run 1, if we run 2, obviously we'll just run these 2. And then I do want to try to get in at least one Parcel Beast in the 80. Alicia seems really high on this card. The idea that you can activate it each turn is pretty nutty when you think about the way that Soulherder normally functions. Like, we're always trying to draw into creatures that can draw us cards. You know, Wall of Blossoms, Icefang Coatl, Coiling Oracle, because of their enter the battlefield ability. But basically you get that trigger just by paying 1 mana with Parcel Beast each turn. So getting that kind of an ETB effect kind of at will each turn seems very powerful. 1 might be the right number if we do want to get some value going on in like a late game. We could potentially El Adamri's Call for a Parcel Beast and then at the end step, and I don't know, like start tapping for value. I don't know if Eldramri's for this guy is going to be the best in a lot of situations, but it just seems like a good card. It's hard for opponents to blow it out because if they remove the creature as it's trying to mutate, Parcel Beast just lands on the battlefield, so you get like a 4-drop instead of a 2-drop, and now you just have a 2/4 on the battlefield that can start activating next turn. So they can't blow you out while it's resolving, and if they try to remove him once the creature is mutated, you can always ephemerate, and then your 2 creatures split up, and you get like an ETB trigger, for example, if you had mutated like an Oracle. So it just seems like a pretty strong card that we should be testing. A little bit weird that we get the new cards to test while we're also shifting the entire deck building strategy to 80 cards. Yeah, you know what? It's actually, I've thought that this, if we treat it, I mean, it's not coming down on turn 2, unless you're putting it on a Mana Dork, which I don't think I'm going to want to do that often. Maybe it could be good because, well, that you can't activate it on turn 2 then. So it just seems kind of poor, right? If you play a Noble Hierarch on turn 1, use 2 mana to put Parcel Beast on the Hierarch, you can't both tap the Hierarch for mana to pay and then also tap the mutated creature so to activate this ability. So at the earliest, you're really going to be looking to play Parcel Beast on turn 3. So in that sense, it's kind of a 3-drop, but it costs 2, so it's sort of a 2-drop. I don't know, but it is blue. It does pitch to force, and that's, you know, we can't underestimate the importance of that. So anyhow, we're going to try to figure out how we go about getting to 80 cards. I'm going to try to fit in one or more of these lands, and I'm going to try to fit in one or more Parcel Beasts. Now, let's take a look at the list. I've been having what I would call success with this current build with 4 colors. I've been having a lot of wins with the Time Warp combo. So I haven't felt like I've wanted a lot more Time Warps in order to be able to go off with the Time Warp combo. In fact, I played against Amulet Titan the other day, and actually I 2-0'd them, and both games I won with the Time Warp combo. The game 1, I actually had it established from turn 4 because I ramped out with a Coiling Oracle and hit a land on turn 2. And then game 2 was a grindier thing, but I did end up winning, closing it out with the Time Warp combo. So the Singleton has felt fine. Siege Rhino has just continued to sort of impress as a way to close out games. As I mentioned earlier, I have played Bant a ton, probably still more than I've played 4 colors, just because when Soulherder was first a thing, it's just months and months and months of Bant. And then finally, I came around a little bit to 4 colors. And I have hundreds of matches with 4 colors at this point, hundreds, I don't know, maybe 200, 300, something. I haven't been keeping track, but probably over 1,000 with Bant, I'd say at this point. I have some perspective on the relative strengths of different closers, finishers. In Bant, I do prefer Deep Forest Hermit over Thragtusk in general. I was playing a build that was really slow with Panharmonicon, and so predicting that I was going to take a lot more damage while trying to establish things like Panharmonicon, I was running Thragtusk for more life gain. But assuming that you're running kind of a standard Soulherder build, Deep Forest Hermit is going to be pretty nuts. But once you go into 4 colors, Siege Rhino is kind of just a lot better. It's a full mana less to get on the board. It's gaining you life. It's draining the opponent. It's a pretty sick combo with Soulherder because every turn you've got that clock ticking on the opponent if you keep blinking Siege Rhino. So yeah, being 4 mana instead of 5, being a 4/5 trampler, this card is really powerful, and it's one of the biggest justifications for splashing black. So anyhow, you guys know the deck. I don't want to spend too much time going into why certain cards are good or bad. I will spend a second talking about Scavenging Ooze. Scavenging Ooze, typically a sideboard card, but Modern is in kind of it's kind of a new world these days with Uro all over the place. You still have Dredge around. You've got this Underworld Breach combo stuff. A lot of graveyard things happening. And so main deck Scavenging Ooze has just been super impressive so far. Even if it's just a kind of a grindy matchup and somebody's like killing all your creatures, you land Scavenging Ooze late in the game and you've got like 8 mana. With a bunch of Astrolabes, you've got as much green mana as you want. Scavenging Ooze can just basically be, like a 6/6 the turn it comes down, not without too much difficulty, while also, again, limiting your opponent's access to their graveyard. So even though it's not an ETB card, we have been running some number of Eladamri's calls, so being able to go grab that as a toolbox creature to answer like an emergency situation where an opponent is about to resolve an Uro. I've had so many turns where I just slam Scavenging Ooze and eat that Uro. It's a really, really powerful line to have access to. But apart from the Skoos, the other creatures are pretty standard Soulherder stuff at this point. So I'm going to talk about proportions in this video a lot. I think it's pretty easy to lose sort of objectivity when you start thinking, oh, I'm going to 80 cards. That's a lot of cards. Like, I'm just going to jam a bunch of stuff into the deck. But I think without a doubt, the most sensible approach is just to sort of take a deck that you've been having success with and sort of linearly try to expand the proportions and then see where you land. There are some cards I'm not going to really want to add more of, like potentially Deputy or Knight, because those are singletons that I can grab with Eladamri's Call. So if I'm adding Eladamri's Calls, I'm going to effectively be adding copies of those toolbox creatures that I can go and grab with the tutor. But there are some cards that I am going to want to sort of ramp up to maintain the proportionality in the 80 card deck that exists in this successful 60 card build. So let's jump into the mana base. I'm not going to get into it with too fine a comb at this point. I think what I'm going to do, so the important ratio is 60 to 80, right? And so if we reduce that, it's 3 to 4, and effectively going from 3 to 4, you're adding a third, right? A third of 3 is 1. You add 1 to 3, you get 4. So every proportion in the deck should just increase by a third effectively. And again, we're going to see where that takes us. And then if we still have space left over, we're going to sort of pack it out with things that seems like the best options. So if the mana is at 22 right now, we want to figure out what a third of 22 is. It's basically almost exactly 7, which says that we should probably want 29 lands. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to find like basic mountains and just plug those in to get my land count up. I don't know if I have 7 of these. I have 40 of them. So these are just placeholders, so that they're super obviously out of place, and I can come back in and figure out exactly which lands I want. Just to get a start with the proportions, so you can see that takes us from 60 all the way up to 67. Suddenly, instead of having 20 spots to fill, I only have 13 spots to fill. So, I mean, yeah, Gavany Township, it's colorless land in a 4-color deck that has pretty strict requirements for its colors. So I am pretty reluctant to add in colorless lands. Actually, I'm not going to do it. If other people want to do it, they can do it. But when you look at this row of spells right here, black, green, green, white, green, blue, green, blue. Finally, we have generic mana, but then we go back blue, blue. One generic, green, green. One generic, white, blue, right? It's one generic, white, black, green, green, blue. Am I getting the point across? It's like, yeah, we play 4 Astrolabes, but this is going to be an 80 card deck. Astrolabes, you can't make more of those. It's a card that you can't really duplicate, sort of like Ephemerate. And it would be great if you always had Astrolabe out when you land a Gavany Township. But I can just tell you right now, there's going to be a lot of matches where you just get Gavany Township as your like third land, and you are already on green, white, and you need blue and black and all these different things, and you don't want to make your mana worse than it already is, right? Like, it's a godsend that we have access to Astrolabe. In fact, I don't think this deck would really function very well at all if it didn't have Astrolabe. I think the mana would be a bit of a mess. I definitely notice every day the games where I don't have Astrolabe on the board, they're much more of a battle to actually play Magic. I have to sort of make sacrificial decisions like, okay, I have a Prismatic Vista, I want to get Death Touch online, I want to cast double green Eternal Witness, but I also need to cast Time Warp, which is double blue. It's really difficult without Astrolabe, and you really don't want to add colorless mana to that. It's why we haven't been running like Field of Ruin, right? And I don't think that 80 cards suddenly changes that. It's not like we have land tutors in our deck. I mean, crop rotation isn't a thing in Modern, as far as I know. And yeah, I don't even think we'd want it. Okay, so I packed out the lands, 29. You know, people running Dorks or Ether Vials were saying 27, which seems sort of shockingly low to me. But Dorks sort of count as, like, I guess half a mana source or something like that. One of the reasons I moved away from Dorks is how fragile they are and how susceptible they are to just getting removed with Thoughtseize or Inquisition. If we keep like a 1-lander or a 2-lander with a Dork, it's like they're taking a land out of our hand. So I've been running 22 lands with no Dorks. Some of these people have been running 21 with Dorks or Ether Vials. And so all of our deck cantrips, so we can run fewer lands than most 60-card decks with this curve would run, because all of our cards basically replace themselves. We're going to be drawing lands more often than like Jund, for example. I'm already starting from a lower place than another deck might with this curve. So 22 scaling up to 29. I feel fine with that. If I find I'm getting flooded all the time, it's really easy to go down to 28. But I wouldn't want to be starting at 27. I also wouldn't want to be playing Ether Vial with an 80-card deck, because Ether Vial is a card you really want in your opening hand. And similar to Astrolabe and Ephemerate, it's not really an effect that can be replicated. So you can't go up to 5 Ether Vials. You can't go up to 6 Ether Vials. So I don't think I'd want to run Ether Vial in an 80-card deck. All right, lands taken care of. Astrolabes, check. Ephemerate, check. We might come back and think about how to add some fraction of an extra Ephemerate in the form of... So people have been mentioning different options. Like there are one mana options that just blink a creature once, and they don't rebound. So basically half of Ephemerate. But I think something like, I think it's called Ghostly Interlude, would be an option. It's a 3 mana instant, 2 generic and a white, that you can choose which of your creatures you want to blink. So you could do that on the opponent's end step. If they can't counter it, you're going to get, potentially blinking multiple creatures, drawing multiple cards, getting things back from the graveyard. So I think if I was going to add a 5th blink effect, I would be looking potentially for something that could have a slightly larger impact like that. I guess something to keep in mind is that we might want to try to scale not just the effects in the deck, but also the mana curve. So if you've got 8, or I guess we should say 10 effects at 1 CMC, if we add a third to that, in theory, maybe we want to have 13. We want to add 3 more cards that at 1 CMC. But in my view, the way that I look at that is I cut Dorks because our deck doesn't really want to ramp. It wants to just hit its land drops, be kind of calm, just keep developing. Turn 3, you can play a 2-drop and path something. You can play a 3-drop. You can do whatever you want once you get to turn 3. We're not a deck that is trying to win on turn 3, win on turn 4, where a dork is really going to ramp you out. So turn 1 effects for me, like I love having Astrolabe. It's a godsend. But Ephemerate has never been a turn 1 play. Right? Our deck has never had a ton of things to do on turn 1 because it doesn't want to do that. Like, it's not a deck it's not an aggro deck. It's not trying to get like a Goblin Guy down on turn 1. The fact that we do have things to do on turn 1 is kind of nice. If there were other broken effects like this that we could play on turn 1, Thoughtseize is an option. But again, I don't want to get too deep into new things in the deck before we've tried to pack out, like, proportionally what's already in the deck. So I'm going to sort of leave these two alone. Talking about math for a minute, like if you take a 2 of an increase... and add 1, basically you're increasing your proportion by 50%, which is sort of close to 33%. It's not that far off, but you have to be aware that it's not a linear sort of increase. The only real spot on increase, if we do want to go exactly a third higher, is just going from a 3 of to a 4 of. So I think I do want a third path, so I'm going to go ahead and add in one of those. Scavenging Ooze is perfect at 1, the same as Deputy, the same as, for me, I think I'm going to keep Soulherder as a 1 of. I might add a Thassa for a similar effect. So Scavenging is perfect because I'm going to be able to grab it with Eladamri's Call. And Night of Autumn, similarly, like, just great as a 1 of. Continuing, Wall of Blossoms groups together with Coiling Oracle. Unfortunately, like, something about I guess the way they organize these cards, it's by like monocolor and then gold cards, but Wall of Blossoms does go with our other 2-drop creatures. Let me check in with chat here. What are you guys talking about? Eerie Interlude. Yeah, Eerie Interlude. Is 4 call enough in 80? Well, so this is the idea, right? Is 2 call has felt spot on for me in 60 cards. So the idea that 4 would not be enough in 80 is a little bit off, I think, because we'd literally be doubling the number of effects, and we're not doubling the size of the deck, right? We're not going from 60 to 120 cards. We're just increasing by a third. So even going up by 1 Eladamri's Call would be increasing that effect by 50%, which is already more than the proportion we're increasing the deck. Now, because we may have a bunch of flex slots where we can sort of thread in some cool utility creatures like Phyrexian Revoker or Vendilion Click or Shalai, we might want to increase the feeling of the deck as like a toolbox deck, in which case we may want to double the number of calls. And then the answer to the question, is that enough? I do think it is enough, because again, I do think that 2 has felt great for me. There are situations where I don't really want to call. It's not really that cool in the first couple turns a lot of the time. It is great in the late game. CFT SOC3 has been on 3 forever, and he has a handful of League 5-0s. With running 3, and 3 again scales very nicely to 4. So taking his approach would be equivalent to running 4 in 80 cards. All right. So anyhow, I was getting into the idea of our 2-drops. The 2-drops are really the gas that fuels this deck. Somebody, I think it was Faust in the Discord, mentioned the idea that seems pretty obvious, and I kind of like poked him for mentioning the idea because, yeah, it's pretty obvious. He was saying that the 80 card version should focus entirely on getting to the late part of the game, because if you can get to cast Yorion, it's probably going to shift the game in your direction. But if we die on turn 3, we're never going to get to cast Yorion if we die on turn 4. Similarly, right? So that is an important thing to keep in mind. And the way that I responded to him was, I said, basically, that's my plan right now with 60 cards. We always want to get to the late game. In fact, some of our weakest matchups are the ones that attack us like really, really, really fast, and we don't have time to establish our 2-drops and start ephemerating and blocking and all that stuff. So I think it's going to be really important, really, really important to scale are our can-tripping 2-drops. Currently, I've had 9, and it's felt really tight. So that means we would want to add 3 more can-tripping 2-drops. Now, this is probably where I'm going to want to get a parcel beast, a parcel beast in here. So maybe I'll put 1 parcel beast. And again, I'm probably going to have to use like a placeholder. So maybe I can go real quick and look for some Simic card. Yeah, well, we have choices for sure. It's parcel. A parcel is a package, and I'm pretty sure that's what they're saying. The only pronunciation of parcels that I've heard is for the football player / coach Bill Parcells. So parcel will do. I'm just gonna grab like a Simic Guild Mage or something. I know it might seem a little bit over the top, but I'm happy to take a few seconds just to have a legible placeholder. I just typed in Simic and I didn't really find anything. Oh, you know what? I could use, hang on. I can use a Merfolk Mistbinder, I guess. That's a Simic 2-drop that I have. So I might not need to buy anything. All right, let me find that Mistbinder. All right, so this guy is going to act as a parcel beast, just to get 1 in there, because I do want to test it. But it's not really a 2-drop, as I said, but it is one of these sort of Coiling Oracle, Risen Reef type effects. And I think it's close enough for our purposes. That leaves 2 more spots. I have Loved Walls, so I think I will add at least 1 more Wall of Blossoms. And then, you know, Charming Prince has a unique enough effect, and I've been really enjoying the life gain in this build. Between Siege Rhino, Knight of Autumn, and Oro, and Scavenging Ooze, actually. Like, I played a game yesterday against just some 8-whack deck, and I ended each game at like 30 life. It was kind of stupid. Post board, I have like Auriok Champions, so every time a creature enters, I'm gaining a life. So with a Blink deck, Auriok Champion just like does double duty, gaining like so much life. So anyhow, Charming Prince gains life. One of the things that Yorion does is it returns your creatures at the next end step. So in that sense, it can sort of help dodge board wipes. You guys know that Charming Prince has a similar effect where if they go for Supreme Verdict and we ephemerate this guy, we can tuck away an Eternal Witness, which will return on the opponent's end step, and you know you can grab back any of your dead creatures that the opponent just wiped away and reestablish immediately. So Charming Prince in an 80-card build, particularly with a bunch of Eladamri's Calls, seems like it's a pretty good fit to pack out our 2-drops. Although, honestly, I was just talking about trying to maintain our proportion of can-tripping 2-drops. But really, if the point is just to sort of get to turn 5, I think Charming Prince serves his purpose, because he can blink a Coiling Oracle, which can basically just act as a Phantasmal Image on Coiling Oracle, at least on the ETB. But also it can just gain life, it can scry. It has a bunch of ways to get us to turn 5 and cast Orion. So, sorry, my trade has been canceled. Let me get rid of that. Hey, Camellia. Welcome to the stream. So you've been playtesting 80 cards. Past the list I've been selling on. I can talk through your card choices. Solid foundation. Well, I appreciate that. Of course, feel free to send me a link. But I'm going to keep going through this process because... I was mentioning earlier, at the very beginning of the stream, I started sort of trying to pack out 80 cards, and I felt like I wasn't being rigorous enough. I really want to think about maintaining proportions, so I'm going to go through this exercise, and then at the end, if I'm at 80 cards, great. Like that's probably going to function pretty similarly mathematically to 60, I would think. Of course, again, we hit a wall with things like Ephemerate and Astrolabe, but I think I'm going to be able to figure that out. So anyhow, continuing, sometimes, let me change my tab real quick. Sometimes MTGO gets sort of stuck on this sort of zoom loop. It's kind of obnoxious. All right, I don't know. Let's go back here, see if it'll stop zooming in. No, it's on like aggro zoom mode. Don't know why it's doing that. Let me see if changing the display changes that. No, not really. All right, looks like it calmed down a little bit. So back to the 2 drops. I started with 9, and that meant I wanted to add 3. So here's a Parcel Beast, which is not really a 2-drop, but again, for my purposes, it's one of these effects, like Coiling Oracle. It's actually kind of a multiplied effect of that. So 1, 2, and I added in a second wall. So we should be good with 2 drops for the time being. I added in a 3rd Path to Exile. I'm going to chill on these guys for the moment. I'm also going to chill on Eladamri's Call and just try to continue with the creatures for the time being. I think it's a pretty easy call to go up to 4 Eternal Witnesses. There have been plenty of Bant Soulherder lists over the past 9 months or whatever that have had success with 4 Witnesses in a 60-card build. I think in an 80-card build. Again, it's very linear. You go from 3, you add a 3rd, you get to 4. So that is what it is. These guys are all singletons. Grabbable by Eladamri's Call. Oro has felt great as a 2 of. Even drawing both of them seems fine because you create this situation where the opponent really can't do very much about it. You've got like redundancy on the board. Like you've got an Oro maybe that you escaped, and you've got one in the graveyard. If you can just attack in, and if the opponent paths it or they block it or whatever, you're always ready to cast another one. It doesn't feel bad. Even if you've got one down, you can cast the second one, and the legend rule, you can just have the second one go to the graveyard. And you still get its effect. So it's basically like a cool sorcery when he's on the battlefield. 2 has felt fine. I don't think I want to go up to 3. I know it's a broken card. But again, we are going to be increasing our Eladamri's calls. In grindy matchups, I have been Eladamri's calling for Oro. Like that, it's just such gas against grindy decks. It's drawing you cards. It's coming back as a big creature that they have to answer. So having 2 in the deck, I think, is going to continue to feel fine. Yeah, come back to Earth. I mean, you just got to understand that MTGO is a big mishmash of random code that's been developed over like 20 years. So you see, it just stopped doing it. So I just changed tabs a couple times. I changed the card view, and it resolved itself. So we went up to 4 Witnesses. Gonna keep Oro. I think I'm gonna keep Siege Rhino at 2. And Time Warp is an interesting one I want to talk about as far as the numbers are concerned. I mentioned earlier, if some of you guys were here, that I have been winning a lot with the Time Warp combo lately. I think it's absolutely core in Bant and 4-color Soulherder at this point. Like if you're not playing with Time Warp, you should be. Our core synergy is between Eternal Witness and Ephemerate, and obviously Eternal Witness and Soulherder, though I've sort of backed off on Soulherder a touch. In my particular build, adding 1 card to your deck that just wins the game when you draw it, I mean, it's really, really simple to include it in the deck, and it makes a lot of sense. There are games where I just cast it, and it's basically just like draw another card and basically pass the turn back to your opponent. But even that's fine, right? Because it ends up being kind of free because you take another turn anyway. But I have been winning a lot with it, but 1 copy has felt fine. I think if I played 2 copies, I'd probably be drawing a little bit more than I want to. So if we think about the numbers, this card is currently 1 in 60. Well, in my current build, if I doubled that, it would be effectively 1 in 30. Showing up fully twice as often. Now that we're going to 80, it actually kind of presents an opportunity to add a second Time Warp. Now it's 2 out of 80, which is 1 in 40. So increasing my original ratio of 1 to 60, not by doubling it, but by let's see, what is that fraction? I'm just reducing it some amount less than half. I'm having trouble actually enunciating the math here, but 1 in 40 instead of either 1 in 60 or 1 in 30. It's kind of a sweet spot. I do want to draw it slightly more than as a 1 of in a 60 card deck, but I don't want it as much as 2 of in a 60 card deck. So 2 of in an 80 card deck is kind of a nice place to be. So adding a second Time Warp, it seems like a very easy decision to me. Very similar to just adding a 4th Eternal Witness, sort of a no-brainer. So let me check in with chat. How come only calls and no Chord? We've got a lot of creatures to convoke for Chord. Yorion untaps all of them, including your mana dorks, after tapping them for mana. So that's true. I guess we pay 5 mana for Yorion, enters the battlefield, blinks 5 of your creatures, they come back untapped, and then you could cast Chord. I mean, it seems like a fine option. Chord, does Chord get any creature, or does it only get green creatures? I don't know that I have a Chord of Calling in my collection. I know that Green Sun Zenith only gets green creatures. I think Chord gets any color. Yeah, I think Chord gets any color. Most of our creatures have green in them, but of course Soulherder doesn't, Deputy doesn't. It's I know it's instant. So yeah, I mean, it could have a place for sure, but as far as, I mean, there's like so many things being tested in Soulherder all the time. I've tested in the last month. I've tested Panharmonicon. I tested the new Thassa. I tested Gifts Ungiven. I tested Achroma, the crazy red morph card. Just been trying, I mean, obviously testing Oro, but that card was obviously a slam dunk from the get-go. Testing main deck Scavenging Ooze. There's just a lot of stuff going on all the time. We're going to 80 cards, which is a massive shift. There's a lot of us playing Soulherder, which is awesome. But I don't know that I want to be testing every single card at the same time in a new 80 card deck. So if there are other people who are really psyched on Chord, particularly with Orion being added, go for it. Like, play a bunch of matches, crush your opponents, come to the Discord, and let us all know that Chord is where it's at, and we'll all jump on the bandwagon. I'm sure, you know. It took a lot of us a long time to try out Eladamri's Call, and it's pretty nutty. It's a good card, and I think that we should definitely be on some number of Eladamri's Calls at this point. So it seems totally reasonable that Chord of Calling, you know, could prove itself in the same way, I guess. So as you can see, we've started to follow the methodology that I was outlining at the beginning of the stream, and we're getting to the point now. We have 73 cards in the deck, which means we've got 7 cards left to pack in here. I haven't addressed all of my removal. I haven't addressed basically the non-creature spells, other than Path to Exile, which I did add a single extra copy of because Path has just been more than pulling its weight in the deck. I do think I feel fine staying on a single Abrupt Decay. It's a much more narrow effect than Assassin's Trophy, but it is incredibly strong against control, where we want to be able to kill Teferi. Like, this card kills a lot of stuff. It kills Death Shadows, it kills Tarmogoyfs, it kills Goblin Guides, but the most important thing that this card kills is Teferi. Since it is kind of narrow, I feel fine leaving it as a singleton. I may want to add one more trophy, because the card does do a lot of work. It's one of our best answers to Tron, particularly in combination with Surgical Extraction. You can just get rid of a Tron land forever. So I think, you know, how many removal spells did I have to begin with? I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we want to add a third of 5, it's like somewhere less than 2. And I added 2. So slightly aggressive scaling of the removal, but removal is important in Modern, and I can always cut back if I feel like it's excessive. One of the things to keep in mind is that we never really need to draw 6 removal spells, because Eternal Witness is going to help us rebuy them from the graveyard. Hey DV, welcome everybody to the stream. COT4, Yeah, I'm definitely gonna go up on tutors. I've just been chilling on that to see like if I just follow out my proportional expansion of the of the 60 card deck that I've been having a good time with, what that would leave us with. I am gonna count up like how I scaled the blue cards, but I feel like I should be comfortable adding in a third force of negation. I think Swizzy in the Discord, who's the other sort of active vocal player right now in the Discord, also running 4 colors. He was saying it's kind of a no-brainer to go up to 4 forces, but it's the kind of approach that I think is a little bit too like knee-jerk. It's like we're adding a lot of cards. Let's add just like a bunch of the best cards. But I've had 2 forces in the deck because the blue count in my deck can't really support 4 forces, and even though it's a great card, you have to sort of figure all the possible scenarios, and jamming 4 is going to put you in a tough spot sometimes. I added a Parcel Beast. I added a Time Warp. I'm only adding 2 blue spells. If you count the force itself, I'm adding 3 blue spells. So I've added 3 blue spells, one of them being a force. I mean, it seems like it could be okay. I'll have to sort of feel it out, but I'm still adding. I still have 5 cards to add. So I'll go ahead and just add in 2 Eladamri's Calls. I might want to just, I don't know. Let's go with 3 for now, because I would only go up to 4 if it really feels like it's becoming more of a toolbox approach. I've felt the way the game plays doesn't change just because we're adding 80 cards. So if I've been on 2 Eladamri's Calls and it's felt good so far, I want the proportions to maintain as I go to 80 cards. I don't just want to pack it out to 4 because that's doubling, and we're not doubling the size of our deck. So unless, again, the toolboxy nature of the deck increases dramatically, significantly, if not dramatically, I think just adding even a single Eladamri's Call is increasing the proportion by 50% compared to the deck size increase of 33%. So I'm going to sit on 3 for a moment, and just sort of gather my thoughts here. We've increased our removal. We've increased our forces up to 3. Our creatures have all scaled at the different spots on the curve. I did keep Siege Rhino and Uro at their current spot because I feel like growing them to 3, again, increasing their presence by 50% in the deck, would be more than I'd want to see them. So, yeah, that's true, Camellia. I totally get that idea for sure. And I'm really excited. And that was the natural direction that my mind took when this 80 card idea first sort of hit the table. Is we've wanted to add a lot of tutor targets in the main deck since we have been running Eladamri's Call. Now 80 cards is going to allow us to do that, but just because we're adding cards doesn't mean those 20 cards should now be Blade Splicer, Vendilion Click, Thragtusk, Glenelender Archmage, all of these random sort of flex cards that we've had access to but have chosen not to run because they just don't make the cut at 60. We can't just take 10 of them and throw them in and say, all right, I'm going to run 6 tutors, and this is now just a tutor deck, because now all of a sudden it's a completely different deck. And why weren't you doing that to begin with? In 60 cards, why were you? Maybe you weren't going to run all of those toolbox creatures, but why weren't you running 3 of them with 4 tutors or 5 tutors in 60 cards, right? So just because we're adding cards doesn't mean you just have carte blanche, or should treat it like carte blanche to just completely change the strategy. I've been really happy with the way that this deck is playing, so I don't want to radically change the proportions. So let's build it out, see what we're left with, and then fill in those spots, basically. Merfolk Mistbinder is holding a spot for a single Parcel Beast. So Camellia, I don't know if you're on the Discord, but some of us have been a little bit excited about this new uncommon. It's the one mutate card that seems like it could slot really comfortably into our deck. There is a person named Alicia on our Discord who has actually just been running some testing already with this card, and she's been really impressed with it. So I want to add a singleton to the deck. So just as a placeholder, a blue-green placeholder. That's what the Mist Herder is. The Mist Binder, I mean. Yeah, I mean, Lavinia is pretty nuts. Like, I've played with Lavinia also, but there are matchups where it's not as relevant, right? Like, I guess, like, most control matchups. And it is a 5-drop. It does have Pro Red. It's like a pretty beefy body. So that, I guess we could talk about, like, our palette of potential, like, highest tier, highest rated, potential flex inclusions, toolbox inclusions. But I'm starting to feel much happier with this starting point. I'm going to know that I'm going to draw a similar proportion of removal and 2-drops. Unfortunately, you can't add more astrolabes. And we did talk about potentially adding another blink effect. So I think I'm just going to go ahead. I don't believe that I have a ghost, an eerie interlude. I think that's what that card is called in my collection. So I think I have to go grab that. Let me jump in here real quick. Yeah, but you can see, like, there's not as much space as we thought. I can trim a little bit if we do go slightly more toolboxy. I can potentially trim, I don't know, 1 or 2 cards. So what to make space for like a planeswalker or 2. But again, planeswalkers seem like they have their best application in like a heavy time warp approach, because if you're taking extra turns, you're going to get more activations. It's not necessary. And obviously, Soulherder started with a bunch of Jace the Mind Sculptors when Nassif was just getting us off the ground. So Planeswalkers could definitely have their place. Just keep in mind that your actual gameplay is not going to change radically, or doesn't need to change radically, just because we're 80 cards. Like, if you're happy with how your deck has been performing, just realize if you're going to add in a ton of Planeswalkers, like, why were you not playing a ton of Planeswalkers before? Or at least some Planeswalkers before. All right, so I'm just looking for Eerie Interlude. It's probably going to be like 0.0001 of a cent. Okay, it's actually 2 cents. It's pretty expensive. But it is a rare, and I don't want more than 1, so I'm going to submit that. And I am going to slot that into the deck. This is going to act sort of as a 5th Ephemerate, and it's testing. We are adding new effects to the deck. Parcel Beast. I'm going to add one of those new Triome lands to the deck. So let's get that Interlude in there. So now we've scaled out our Ephemerates only by 25%. But I've mentioned a few times that because we've got Eternal Witness, we don't always have to draw 4 pieces of removal. We can get 1 path and cast it 4 times with Eternal Witness. 1 Ephemerate is often good enough in the deck. So I don't know, a 3-drop Ephemerate. I think decks have definitely been built around these kinds of cards. Like back when Ghostway existed and this card didn't, there were definitely Ghostway decks that were just looking to play a bunch of Flicker Wisps, a bunch of I guess Eternal Witnesses. I can't remember, but I've played against them in the past, and these kinds of effects, these 3-drop bounce your board effects, can be pretty brutal. So I don't know. It's testing. I don't really want to add too many new cards, but we do have to sort of match or increase our Ephemerate count, I think. Yeah, so of course, if you guys have thoughts about cards to include, so you can mention it now for sure. Camellia, so you are usually hard casting it or mutating it. Parcel B is interesting. Well, so we're definitely looking to mutate it. So what happens, for those of you listening who are not familiar with the ins and outs of the way mutate works, we play like a Coiling Oracle on turn 2. We untap on turn 3, play a 3rd land, tap green blue, and we're going to target the Coiling Oracle with Parcel Beast's mutate ability. Mutate counts as casting a spell. It's not an activated ability, so it does go on the stack. It can get countered, again, because it's not an activated ability, it's just casting it. But as sort of a failsafe, it's very similar to the Theros bestow mechanic, where if you're trying to mutate onto the Coiling Oracle and the opponent bolts the Coiling Oracle, what happens is the Parcel Beast doesn't just like lose its target and go to the graveyard. The Parcel Beast actually hits the battlefield and resolves as itself. So that's actually not that smart in most cases, because if you kill the Oracle, now we've just got our 4-drop on the battlefield, and it's just going to stay there. Of course, it has summoning sickness in that case if they remove the Oracle. But if it does mutate onto the Oracle, you can put it on top of the Oracle. It will now be a 2/4, a mutated Coiling Oracle that's a 2/4, so it blocks much better. And with the 3rd mana that you just played, it doesn't have summoning sickness if it mutated, and you can activate it immediately. So the way I see it working most of the time is you play your 2-drop, turn 3, you're going to mutate it. Past the turn, if the opponent attacks with a prized amalgam, a 3/3, right? You can stonewall it with your big butt, go to the end step, and then tap Parcel Beast to basically get a Risen Reef trigger. Similar to Coiling Oracle's ability, but you don't have to reveal the card to the opponent. You just put it in your hand. So the fact that you can activate it every turn seems pretty bonkers, and I wouldn't be surprised if I see myself wanting to go higher than a singleton on this card. It's just kind of in a weird spot right now because it's kind of a 2-drop. It's kind of a 3-drop because you can't put it on any creature on turn 2 yet, or shouldn't put it on any creature on turn 2. So you have to wait till turn 3. But then in another sense, it's a 4-drop. So not exactly sure how it fits on the curve, but Alicia has been really impressed with this card, and Alicia plays a lot of Magic, and I trust her card evaluation. So anyhow, let's go back to the deck. Sorry, so I just packed out these Ephemerates. If this feels too heavy as a 3-drop, I can always either take it out or replace it with whatever the name of the card is that is like half Ephemerate. Wait, Camellia, what are you asking about? If the target of the mutate gets killed, it 100% resolves. That's been clarified many times. If you Google MTG mutate mechanic, you'll get a video. I can try to pull it up right now. You'll get this video, this mutate video, and they'll explain everything about the ins and outs, particular potential weird rules situations. But yeah, it just makes sense that it would not get crazy blown out, because then mutate would be the worst the worst mechanic ever, because every time you try to pay 7 mana and there are cards that cost 7 mana to mutate. If the opponent could just bolt your creature, that would be kind of ridiculous. It's like trying to play a 7 mana aura in that case, right? There's a reason that auras cost 1, right? It's because there's a huge blowout possibility. It's like, I'm going to play an aura, and they're like, no, I'm going to bolt your creature, and you're out 2 cards, right? Wizards want mutate to see play, so of course they can't really have that potential for blowout. Now the potential for blowout does exist, and this is really, really important, so listen up if you haven't thought too much about mutate. When it resolves, it's a 2/4, right? It's a 4-drop. Opponent cracks a fetch. They go to Fatal Push your Parcel Beast. Now, Parcel Beast and your Coiling Oracle are going to die and go to the graveyard. So it can be a blowout if you get your both creatures removed once they're on the battlefield. And there's a long conversation about this on the Discord. I was trying to make the point that mutate is somewhat better in our deck than in other decks because we have access to Ephemerate. If an opponent targets a mutated creature that's threatening to take 2 cards out, if we ephemerate that mutated creature, they both go away into exile, and then they come back as separate creatures. So Coiling Oracle is going to trigger again. You're going to have a standalone Parcel Beast. Ephemerate it basically flips the potential blowout. Like the opponent was trying to 2-for-1 us, and instead we 2-for-1 the opponent. Probably more than that because we're going to get a rebound on the Ephemerate. So in that sense, having such a powerful way to protect our creatures and get value out of them, I think that Mutate is a little bit safer, certainly, in our deck than in any other deck. No, it's not trash. And I think that sort of explains why there are some mutate effects that cost like 7. There's an Abzan. There's an Abzan mutate creature. It's a mythic that its mutate ability costs 7. It's like black, black, green, green, white, white, or whatever. And if you pay its mutate ability, you get like 10 CMC worth of dead creatures back onto the battlefield or something like that. So imagine if you paid 7 and they just like bolted your creature. It would be like the stupidest thing ever. All right, so let's continue on this journey that we've begun here. All right, I'm gonna catch up with some of the ideas I might have forgotten about. We haven't discussed planeswalkers, so we may want to add a planeswalker or two for sure. But I'm leaning towards like definitely adding in some toolbox effects, because when you have a bunch of Eladamri's calls, then having access to powerful creatures with really strong effects is something you want. So at this point, obviously Scavenging Ooze is more than justified, since it's doing that crazy zoom thing again. Okay, stop. All right, anyhow, so Scavenging Ooze more than justified because it is this 80 card approach. We might have more targets. Oh wait, somebody asked me about Soulherder and why I've only got one of them. So basically, after hundreds or more than certainly more than 1,000 across all the versions, I've played more than 1,000 matches with Soulherder at this point, and Soulherder itself is just kind of a clunky card. Very easy to bolt or push. If the opponent's tapped out on turn 3 and you get to slide a Soulherder in there, yeah, okay, you're going to get to draw a card off an Icefang Coatl. Then the opponent's going to untap and they're going to bolt it, or they're going to Lava Dart it once and then recycle it and kill it as a 2/2. It's just fragile. It's fragile, and it's not something we often want to be casting in a lot of matchups on turn 3. So I've just found that it's something that I want to, first of all, draw later in the game, and running singletons in a deck that's designed to get to get to the later part of games. It's gonna be, excuse me. It's gonna be more likely to show up in the latter part of the game because we're going to draw a lot of cards as these games go along. And that's when I want Soulherder, like when I've got a bit of a board, when the opponent's low on cards, when I have Ephemerates in hand or forces to protect the Soulherder. Now it's time to play Soulherder on turn 7 and just sort of slam the door shut. Don't really want to play it on turn 3. Additionally, Eladamri's Call just makes running it as a singleton not nearly as bad, I guess. Not nearly as limiting, because if I want access to Soulherder in a certain spot, Eladamri's Call is 3 more virtual copies of Soulherder. If Soulherder dies, I've got 4 Eternal Witnesses that can go get it back. If I don't have an Eternal Witness, again, I've got 3 Eladamri's Calls to get an Eternal Witness to get the Soulherder. So if the Soulherder eats a path, those things happen, It's like if I don't have the Ephemerate, if I don't have the Force to protect the Soulherder and it eats a path to exile, so be it, I have no more Soulherder for the rest of the game. Yeah, Soulherder can blink Yorion for sure, and that's like really powerful. But Ephemerate and Eerie Interlude can also blink Yorion. So I have felt comfortable with the 4 Ephemerates. I'm going to try to get rid of this stupid zoom effect that's happening here. Let's see if that just always does it. Doesn't look like it does it. Okay, if I hit a bunch of keys. Stop. I hate this. Anyhow, I was saying that I have felt fine with my amount of blink effects in the deck, so I don't feel like I need to run more than one Soulherder. Okay, let's figure out what I want to do with these last three spots. Yeah, isn't this ridiculous? Stop zooming. Holy crap. Like I'm trying to hit like Z because Z is my zoom key, and oh my god, stop it. I'm not even on that card. Stop. All right, I'm just chill in the corner over here. So we've expanded our mana base to 29. Of course, that can get trimmed back to 28, which may well be a very powerful option for if we're on the fence between 28 and 29 lands. Running 28 isn't just going to increase the chance that we draw more gas. It's going to give us one extra spot to slide in another toolbox creature, and so those are really valuable spots. So at this point, I've scaled the deck exactly how I wanted to do it. The only question mark I'd say would be whether Eerie Interlude wants to be another 1 CMC narrow blink effect rather than a 3 CMC sort of broad effect. So that testing will sort of show how that feels. Okay, so what do you guys think are the 3 most important flex creatures? I'm going to pull up the primer if I can. And we can go to the section that has all of the flex creatures. There's no 1-drop monodorks. I thought Herder played some, especially with Yorion. It seems like we're plentiful on card advantage and engine, but may lack speed against uninteractive decks, right? It feels like our turn 1 plays are low as well. We don't often want to turn 1 path, so it's just Astrolabe. Yeah, and we also don't want to turn 1 ephemerate. So we've never really had a ton of turn 1 effects. For months and months, I played Noble Hierarchs, and the card felt fine. But Noble Hierarch was at its peak in our deck when we were trying to land Oko on turn 2. I actually think I may have been off of Dorks before Oko, and I was like, okay, it's time to ramp into turn 2. I really, really want 3 mana on turn 2. But if you look at... sorry, losing my train of thought. If you look at our deck list, in general, our 3-drops don't really want to come down on turn 2. Like, if you play Eternal Witness on turn 2, you're going to get back a fetch land, maybe. Soulherder on turn 2. You don't have a creature out yet that you want to blink. It's just going to eat a Lava Dart. Knight, there's nothing to blow up. Deputy, there's nothing to detain. So we haven't really had a reason to ramp into turn 2. And I'm not dying to be ahead of the curve on this deck, basically. Just 1 second, guys. So it's kind of a funny time since we're all stuck inside. My wife also makes videos. She's a ceramicist, and we're sort of competing for the spot in the house to do videos. So anyhow, hopefully that explains why I don't play Dorks. They're also really fragile at the beginning of a game. If you keep a hand, like you mull to 6, you keep 1 land and a dork, and then you get Thoughtseize and they take your dork away, or you play your dork and it gets bolted. It's fragile mana. Our deck is, first of all, not really trying to ramp into anything super powerful. It's trying to grind. It's trying to hit its land drops. So I do not want to trim my land count to play Dorks, because Dorks get Thoughtseize, Dorks get bolted, and that's a card that's not going to replace itself. Our deck needs cards in its hand because our individual cards are so weak by themselves. Our deck needs to build like a pile, like a mountain of synergy. And you start with 7 cards, sometimes 6 cards, sometimes 5 cards. And if one of those cards is a monodork, you know, Godspeed, because it could get removed and that's never coming back. I guess with Uro, it's kind of fuel, but that's a really weak justification for running a card, is like you hope it dies so that you can cast Uro. So anyhow, let me scroll down to these flex slots here. All right, so we have preferred card choices. These are like kind of like main. Well, let's see. I haven't started Watcher, Thassa. Oh, Thassa. I think I do want a Thassa in here. So let's go ahead and add a Thassa for now. If I can get around the stupid zoom. You know what, guys? I might just need to restart Magic Online. Like, Jesus. Get it together, Watsy. Yeah, dorks are really powerful Magic cards. There's no two ways about it, right? They're extremely strong Magic cards. And I mean, I've talked. If you look at the primer, I have a section on Noble Hierarch. In fact, I think it's still in the core deck list: Noble Hierarch and/or Birds of Paradise. They're strong. They help you do things sooner in the game before the opponent can do things. But I've played without dorks now at least probably in the neighborhood of 200 matches, if not 300 or 400, and it feels so much better without dorks. Like, just as a very simple sort of statement, you come up against like prowess, and your dorks, you don't have dorks to get lava darted. Instead, you're just playing your land, playing your second land, getting a wall of blossoms down. Like, just chill out for a little while, right? Like, get some defense up, right? You still got a whole bunch of cards in hand. You didn't waste a card getting a dork lava darted. All right, so I see some of these cards that you're throwing out here. I see on that list that I'm definitely not running main deck Collector Oof. Absolutely not. Like, maybe you guys have been seeing lots of artifact decks, but I haven't been seeing that many. I know there are some combo decks. I know there are some Urza decks. That is a sideboard card for me. I was just going to say, I think Vendilion Click is crazy strong in this metagame. Like, against Primeval Titan, like shipping a Titan away, shipping away a Supreme Verdict. Yeah, Lavinia is a 5-drop though, and she's competing with Yorion. So I don't know about 5-drops, but it's definitely a good idea. Muldrifter is a solid suggestion. Let me get a Thassa in here. I'm gonna throw a click in. Oh, this is the wrong list. Hold up. Let me get Thassa out of there. Let's go to that one. So 3 slots left. Add a Thassa in. Now Thassa is also padding out my blue count, which I love. I really like the idea of click. We could change it for sure. That brings us from 77 up to 79. We're getting pretty close. Prowess, I'm pretty sure, is still close to the top of the format. So we're going to check out the metagame. It's possible that it's been fading. Interesting. It's on the second level now. Instead, like even just a week ago, it was, or 2 weeks ago, it was up here, like one of the top 3. But Burn is still on the top. So what are we looking at here? Well, I don't know. I mean, you've got the thing about Oof is that it stops our Astrolabes, and Astrolabes is like a clutch card, really important in our deck. So in 4 colors, I just prefer to have 2 Siege Rhinos as my closers. It's possible I could add another closer, but I feel like getting more niche sort of sideboard effects, sideboard type effects, or I guess, what am I thinking of? Tutor effects in the deck might be pretty good. Now, Vendilion Click definitely can stand on its own 2 feet. It doesn't really need to be justified like as like Collector Oof. It's like, oh god, I hope I don't draw Collector Oof against Burn, right? Click is going to be fine-ish against Burn, right? Same with Thassa, a little slow. So I think Phyrexian Revoker was another one that has come up. It's easy on the mana, obviously. So if I add that in, it takes me all the way up to 80. Phyrexian Revoker, it's got 2 power, can trade with a Goblin Guide. It does die to Lava Dart, which is kind of a pain in the butt, but then so do all of our snakes. Lava Dart, we don't really care if this dies. There's no real activated abilities in that deck. So you can see, like, I very rapidly got to 80. I just scaled up the creatures. Now at this point, Venser is one that I had not been running in 4 colors for a while. I just found myself sideboarding it out all the time. But it is a great card to be able to call for. So let me go ahead and add Venser. We might have to actually start like trimming backwards. Yeah, now Venser has long been stock in the Bant approach, but in 4 colors, when you've got a bunch of other competition at 4 mana, particularly the Siege Rhinos, just felt that I wasn't really looking to draw him. Like tons of matchups, I was just taking him out. So, but I have found myself in situations after taking him out where I wanted him. So I could see him squeezing into this 80 card list for sure. So let's take a look at that long list that I saw a minute ago. I mean, Meddling Mage, I guess against Titan decks, we're gonna like turn 2 call and turn 3 play Meddling Mage, naming Primeval Titan, hold up Ephemerate. I mean, it's really slow, but I feel like in that matchup, what I'm calling for is Night of Autumn to kill Dryads. I mean, it's a good card. Meddling Mage is a good card. But I mean, Alicia is running Wasteland Strangler, right? So there's a lot of good cards in Magic. I don't know that that every Magic card is for every deck. Well, I don't know. I'd say that Meddling Mage is probably best as a 4 of in humans, if we're going to be literal about it. So I get it. Like, you can call for it when you want it. You don't have to call for it when you don't want it. I'm just trying to think of the matchups where I really want Meddling Mage. I guess combo decks. Let's check out the metagame. So where do I want Meddling Mage? I don't really see any matchups in the first tier where I really want Meddling Mage. I mean, I guess Urza. It's just that against Bant Snowblade, you have to name Path, or I mean, no, they don't. Yeah, you have to name Path, otherwise it's just going to get removed. And then, I mean, I've got Pithing Needle in my sideboard. I can't tutor for it. I've got a Phyrexian Revoker in the main deck now, which just turns cards off. So Meddling Mage seems to be competing with Phyrexian Revoker's spot. And honestly, I don't know, Phyrexian Revoker seems better, doesn't it? Because it's easier on the mana. You name a non-land, and activated abilities can't be activated. So even this thing can even shut off mana dorks. Yeah, because what if the opponent has played the card that you're trying to stop? Like, what if you're trying to stop Jace, right? And you cast Meddling Mage on, and you name Jace, but but what if they've already cast the Jace? Then Phyrexian Revoker can come down and still deal with it, right? I'm not saying it's better than it. I'm just trying to talk through why we would want one over the other. So yeah. I don't know. I think that I like Revoker better. Can you give me an argument for why Meddling Mage is stronger than Phyrexian Revoker? I guess Meddling Mage can be ephemerated, so you can kind of change the thing that you named if that becomes relevant. But I feel like once you've named something, you probably named it because you wanted it to stay with that name, right? Interlude seems pretty clunky. Yeah, it could be pretty clunky. I agree. And also, I've tested Thassa, and while she can be good, it's also slightly clunky. I feel like I'd rather kind of load up on a slightly lower part of the curve. And as I was saying, I was kind of happy with the amount of blink effects that I have in 60 cards with Ephemerate and Soulherder. And so if we were at 5, in theory, I guess that means we would want to add like 1.5 to 2 cards, so one or two cards. So I've added Eerie Interlude and Thassa, but I also added an Eladamri's Call, which is effectively another copy of Soulherder for when I want it. No, I don't really want Fatal Push. Like, what am I killing on turn 1? Like, I guess you can kill a bird or like an Arbor Elf, or a Monodork, basically, right? But I don't really see the need like to kill Monodorks. Like removal is just base. It's not at its best on turn 1, right? So if I'm trying to like, why wouldn't I not add? I guess you're saying that if I path something on turn 1, obviously that's pretty terrible because pathing a Monodork is never smart, right? So why don't I add like hard removal against Monodorks? And Fatal Push is a good card. It's one that I've played in the black sideboard before, but I really just prefer this more robust 2 CMC removal. So I'm at 81 right now. I think I'm going to just cut. What is the name of the card that is like a worse ephemerate? Just the 1 CMC. Yeah, I think Cloud Shift is the one. Thank you guys. So are you guys, maybe because Yorion is like an Eerie Interlude effect, right? Yorion does the same thing as Eerie Interlude. And we're always going to have access to Orion every game. Maybe I should err on the side of I'm pretty sure I don't have Cloud Shifts. I also spelled it wrong. Yeah, I don't have any Cloud Shifts, so I guess I should buy one of those real quick. Momentary Blink for reuse value. Isn't that the 2-drop into 4-drop that somebody mentioned on the Discord recently? Momentary Blink. Let me check that. I don't know. I feel like we get our recursion from enough recursion from Eternal Witness. Like 2 mana is so different than 1 mana. Yeah, I'm more in on the 1 mana spell. It's kind of a cool option, and I like knowing that there are people, Soulherder players out there thinking about those kinds of spells. All right, guys, I am going to sort of wrap this up in the next few minutes here. We were talking about Cloud Shift. Let me go ahead and buy one of these things. This has to be, again, fractions of a cent. Yep, 1/1000th of a cent. Or, no, 1/10 of a cent. 1/1000th of a dollar. Too many windows. Magic. I don't need all these windows. All right. So let's get Cloud Shift in here. Still at 81. I'm going to trim Thassa, leave Venser, and then just do a quick review with you guys. This list is extremely provisional, and I want to take a look at Camellia's list because you know you're here with me on the stream today, and you've put some thought into this. But hopefully you guys have followed my thought process. I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna be a little bit. The thing is, playing 22 lands, going up to, if you take a third of that, it's slightly more than 7. So 29 should be conservative. So 28 could be like just too little. Just maintaining proportions, but it would open up an entire other flex sort of. Now, I'm also not on 4 calls. Remember, I'm trying to maintain proportionality, but if we're seeing that I'm adding things like Revoker and Click, I think we probably want to go to 4 calls. Just have a feeling, you know, going with math, that 4 calls is just going to be a little bit clunky, but let's you know, you start with 4 and then you can always cut back. Yeah, come back to Earth. Just make sure you post your thoughts on Discord, and I'll see it. Camellia, I don't know if you're on the Discord. Anybody who's not listening, you should definitely get in there with us. There's tons of conversation every day. You know what? I'm going to trim down to 28, and we'll see how it feels. We're in new territory with these 80-card decks. Who knows what the right amount of lands is to play? It's going to take a long time to figure it out. Probably played like, I don't even, it's hard to estimate at this point, like tens of thousands of matches of Magic playing with 60 cards and literally 0 with 80 cards. So we're going to have to figure things out as we go along. All right, so I trimmed a land. I added in the 4th Eladamri's Call. My flex creatures right now are Venser, Click, and Phyrexian Revoker. Well, and I guess you might as well count Scooz, but Scooz is like top of the list and probably not going to get cut. If I scroll down one more time, try to see... Okay, Gadok Teague, Shalai, Collector Oof, Meddling Mage, Lavinia, Muldrifter. So Muldrifter is one I'd like to see find its way in here, but the 4-color approach is very different than the 3-color approach, and I'm pretty happy with where I landed here. It feels like I took my deck and made it 60 cards. I made it 80 cards from 60 cards, and actually. Kind of keeping with, I think I'm going to trim back to 3 calls, and I think I'm just going to add a Muldrifter. I think I do want to have access to that effect. Now, as I mentioned, I've been happy with 2 calls, and adding a 3rd just increases my access by 50%, whereas the deck is only growing by 33%. So I should see calls a little more often than I typically have been seeing them. I'm not adding tons and tons of very niche creatures, right? I have just been adding pretty versatile creatures. I love having Scooz in the main. You can't really go wrong with Vendilion Click. People have been on Muldrifter forever. Again, Venser, hard to go wrong with that. Phyrexian Revoker, it's on curve as a 2/1, and if nothing else, trades with a Goblin Guide, right? So, oh yeah, it's a copy. It's a placeholder for Parcel Beast, which will slide in there pretty soon. Parcel Beast, kind of a weird 2/3/4 drop. Anyhow, guys, not really talking about the sideboard today. One of these cards will be Yorion, this guy. So hopefully that process was useful, interesting for some of you guys. For me, I've been loving my deck with 60 cards. I didn't want to change the strategy. I didn't want to go like 100% into a toolbox approach. I wanted to maintain proportions. When I get opening hands, I want to make sure that I have 2 or 3 lands, at least one of the 2-drop cantripping creatures, and failing that, at least a 2-drop, if not 2 2-drops, maybe 1 3-drop, and some interaction. And so by growing the proportions as the deck grows, you're making it that likely that it's going to feel like the same deck that it was at 60 cards or similar. So thanks very much for joining me, guys. If you haven't followed me on Twitch yet, make sure to do that. That way you'll get notified whenever I start a stream. And if any of you would like to support my stream, usually I'm playing matches, but the last couple streams I was just like chatting about what we're going to do now if we do run Yorion. If you'd like to support the stream, please feel free to subscribe. You get access to a couple of cool exclusive emotes that I designed myself. I made a Soulherder laughing emote and an Ephemerate emote, and there'll be more of those coming. If you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you can actually get a free subscription to another channel or a channel every month. So if you've got Amazon Prime, you can just sort of subscribe to me for free. And that's it. I'll see you guys next time. Oh, my bad, Camellia. Thank you for the reminder. I was absolutely going to check out your list. Let's get on that. So you gave me a link here earlier. All right, it's tapped out. So I'm going to actually manually type this in here. tappedout.net/mtg-dex/Mantion. Nope, not that. All right, here we are. So yeah, cool. I think this is it, right? Or if it's not, let me know. So let's see. Soulherder blinks Yorion every turn, which blinks your board, puts a ton of counters on Soulherder. That's true. I might want to be looking for Soulherder more often in this build. I'll have to see how often we actually get to cast Yorion. The deck aims to play out as a typical Soulherder deck, ramping up the engine. Mana and card advantage in the form of engine and key disruption. Reliable payoff. Yeah, by turtling even more. So, I'm starting to see like some very similar choices. Shalai is a great one. For me, it's one that I've thought about squeezing into 60 cards, but it's just been at the fringe. And so, going up to 80 doesn't necessarily change that in my view. Thragtusk has always been a great option in Bant. Venser is core in Bant. Going up to 4 Witnesses makes sense. 1 Charming Prince makes a lot of sense. 8 Dorks is wild. Wow. Yeah, get mana quickly, get the engine online as fast as possible. See, for me, that seems weak because... So how many lands are you running? 28? All right, so that seems fair. I think that's what I landed on just now. So 28 lands is, I guess, then the dorks for me are just a lot of air, right? Like, imagine you just draw your lands on curve, and I don't know, like the birds are gonna... In my experience... They'd make the mana unstable, like they get Thought Seized and then you can't play Magic. They get Lightning Bolted, you can't play Magic. And they're just air. Like when you get to turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, all you want to draw is your gas, your engine pieces, and it's like, okay, I draw a Noble Hierarch. Okay, next turn, I draw a land. Next turn, I draw Birds of Paradise. It's too much air. Like 10% of your deck is dorks. It seems too much in my view. Honestly, I've made the point that there's nothing we're really ramping into that's that powerful, right? Like, set up our defense, get Ephemerate online, counter some stuff, path some stuff, and we'll get to turn 5, you'll get to turn 6. It's what matchups do we want to really push the mana out early? Like you could say, I guess, against fast matchups, right? Against decks that are going to win really fast. Against humans, against burn or prowess. But those are burn and prowess are the ones that are just going to be able to destroy your mana dorks. Every other slow matchup, we don't really want to draw Bird's Paradise, right? Like against control, do you want to have 10% of your deck be mana dorks? So anyhow, Orion is only 1/3 more cards in the library. Yeah, exactly. So unless you had, this is exactly the point of this stream, DV Neil. Thanks for backing me up. So Camellia here is saying, my premise is that even if I draw dorks later, having extra mana to play all the extra cards drawn. Well, I don't know. I mean, I found myself in situations plenty of times where I'm trying to draw gas, right, and get things going. Like the opponent got me down to 0 cards somehow, and then in those situations, mana dorks are just like death. So, I would not be opposed to trying out 4 dorks, like but 8 dorks just seems hyper aggressive. I feel like it's leaning towards that mentality where you're like 80 cards. What am I going to do with 80 cards, right? And you got to keep that proportionality in mind, unless, of course, you're just like trying to pave a totally new approach where it's like, I see you've got some Court of Callings, you've got some Eldadamri's Calls, maybe add 2 more tutors, go up to 3 and 3, and then just go like trim 4 of those mana dorks and just add 4 bullets, right? Add 4 amazing creatures that you can go and pull with all of these tutors. That seems like an approach that deserves testing, I think. Time Warp, I might go up to 2. I love that card. But let me read through this analysis real quick, and then I think I'm going to call it a day. I need to get out of the kitchen. Depends on... So we're talking here about Meddling Mage versus Phyrexian Revoker. Really depends on what you think... What you want, I think. Let's look at the top 3 decks. Stoneblade, okay, Tron, Revoker. Revoker hits both Teferis, Jaystone Forge, Astrolabe. So probably not going to name Astrolabe since I'm playing Astrolabe. All right, a lot of stuff. Revoker can be played after they are cast. Mage is a better opening hand card. Revoker looks like a All right, yeah, let's just talk about it in Discord. It's an interesting thing, but I love Pithing Needle. Pithing Needle comes in like all the time. It's house against like all sorts of decks, control decks, Jund, combo decks. So without any more delay, guys, thanks very, very much for joining me. Please subscribe if you want to support the channel. Please follow, and I'll catch you guys next time, I'm sure, with